Are the intros done? I'm Moses Muwonge, so I don't know, the intro is done, or are we going to start the session? So I'm just jumping in.
We can just do quickly, since Moses is the facilitator and it's just the 7 of us. So if we can just say name and affiliation and country so that he knows who's in the room.
Hello, this is Lorelei Goodyear with FP 2030. I'm a Senior Technical Advisor for our Emergency Preparedness and Resilience work, and I'm based in Seattle, Washington.
Thank you for coming.
Hi, this is Andreas. I'm based in Berlin for DSW, with a local partner in Uganda being Action for Health. Hello.
Hi, I'll just introduce myself again. I'm Leah Pileski from the Irish Family Planning Association.
Hello, yes, thank you so much.
In Dublin. Thanks.
You're welcome to the round.
Everyone, introducing us once again, I'm Mervyn Christian with the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health at the Advanced Family Planning Initiative.
Thank you, Marvin. I'm Moses Muwonge, facilitating this session, and I'm a director, Samasha, which is a civil society organization based in Uganda, and we mainly focus on advocacy and accountability as an organization. This session is about accountability at whom and for what. And we are looking at really how can we strengthen accountability for family planning, and more especially focusing on family planning commitments. We know that the FP 2020 agenda, though it achieved a lot in terms of the accountability mechanism, there is still an unfinished agenda. Accountability is critical to achieving commitments. However, accountability structures vary widely, and in most cases, they are weak in countries. And also we are finding challenges of accountability at subnational level. So how do we move forward? This session is going to specifically focus on accountability framing, more especially looking at mutual accountability and the guiding principles. We would also like to know the players, the key players in accountability, who should be part of driving forward accountability at country level. Whenever we're implementing accountability mechanisms, sometimes there's that feeling of accountability is for certain people and certain key players, but we hope going forward in FP 2030, we all move together as a block. Then the other area that we need to focus on for our session today is that how do we leverage and sustain long-term funding for accountability? We've been having issues of funding for advocacy, but forgetting accountability. So this session, we hope maybe we shall focus a bit on financing and sustainability for accountability, mainly at country level and also at global level and subnational level. We've had some key lessons learned from implementation of a motion tracker, which is a tool that was developed by Samasha, and you're working with Population Action PAI in Indonesia, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Nigeria to see how we can translate FP commitments into action. And we've had key lessons learned, but one of the main ones is really the basic understanding of accountability at country level. The other issue is, and that has impacted on how accountability issues are implemented at country level, just based on the understanding of the word accountability, and also challenges of ownership. Who owns the commitments? If government makes commitments, or if a donor makes commitments, who is accountable for those commitments? And how do we ensure that we achieve those commitments? So Friends, let me hope that at the end of this 45 minutes, maybe we'll have moved a needle moving forward into understanding accountability. This session here, the next slide, please. We are going to be organized because of the limitations of time. And we hope if you can raise your hand. If you plan to contribute or would like to contribute. And also feel free to use the chat function to agree and build upon contributions of the person speaking. Please mute your microphone when you're not speaking to reduce background noise. It would be wonderful to see your faces. So if feasible, if your internet broadband width is good, please turn on your camera. And I've turned on my camera in Uganda. We've just finished our elections and they cut off internet, but I'm able to show my face. So I think most of us will be able to do that. Please limit individual comments to 1 to 3 minutes to allow, now that we are many, I think we may have enough time. And then please stay on the topic as we have limited time for discussion. So those are the expectations. Next, please. So now I hand over to Monday to take us through the question of what does accountability mean to you? Because it's going to be central to our discussion.
Thank you, Moses. So I just pasted the link on the chat box, and Sophie's just showing that. We just wanted to get a sense of, we know accountability means different things to different people. So if you can just go on that, click on that link and just type 2 words that come to mind when you think of accountability or when you hear accountability, and then we'll have a conversation based on your responses. So if you can just take 2 minutes to do that. Just click on the link and then 2 to 3 responses.
Yeah, I can see taking responsibility, answerability, responsibility, partnership. Yeah, I see responsibility, the majority have mentioned responsibility. Wow. Answerability is being, responsibility and transparency are coming out to be the dominant. Impartiality, honesty, follow through, partnerships. It's interesting to see that answerability is transparency. Okay. So as of now, transparency has taken over responsibility. Monday, I think we measure this by the size of the word, the size of the letters. So I think the majority of us are saying that accountability means transparency, responsibility, measurable commitments, answerability, and tracking studies. Okay, so thank you so much. So we shall really move forward and see what accountability means. As you can see, answerability is not really a keyword. It's in a small letters. Can I say small size? The font is small. So it's just a perspective in which you look at accountability as looking at transparency. So Monday, you can. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We wanted to see how you understand mutual accountability. Though we asked a question about accountability, but if you look at the post-FP 2030 agenda, we are going to be looking at mutual accountability. And this is the current understanding of what mutual accountability means, which is that the FP 2030 partnership encourages mutual accountability approach where governments, in collaboration with the key stakeholders, are obligated to deliver on the commitments they have made, and civil society is galvanized to support the implementation of action plans and engaged to monitor progress towards achievement of the commitments along with the government. I think if you look at the previous slide, which was the sort of the icebreaker, we looked at accountability as meaning transparency, as meaning taking responsibility. And some of us mentioned the answerability. When you move forward to mutual accountability, this is what going forward will be the understanding of mutual accountability. If you have any questions, please, you can ask. This is going to be interactive. So let us discuss as we move forward. So maybe I'll allow questions on what you feel about this understanding of mutual accountability. Vis-a-vis the definition of accountability.
Feel free to unmute yourselves if you have any comment or any feedback.
Hi, this is Andreas. As I said, I follow the advocacy efforts of our organization and our partners in Berlin for Germany, at the EU level in Brussels, and in 4 East African countries. I would like to make 2 comments. The first one, and this is mainly about the last 2 lines in this slide, where it's about passing on the accountability to subnational units. Because I think that, at least in the experience I have from the advocacy my colleagues in East African countries do, there is quite a good effort to increase family planning budgets at the subnational units. And we, for example, at DSW do budget studies to compare the budgets, how they are over the past years and how they are developing. And we give our youth champions a tool with the budget studies to demand accountability. But yet, I don't think that subnational advocacy is really connected to, for example, the family planning 2020 commitments of most national governments. Yeah, I find it a very interesting exercise to see how, with the launching of a new partnership, this link could be strengthened, and what are some of the best practices breaking national commitments down subnational levels. And then my second comment goes the other way around, going up, because I think at the African Union level, there are quite a few commitments and roadmaps that we could work with on accountability. such as the 2017 roadmap for the African Year on Investing in Youth and the Demographic Dividend, which I think some actors, such as the National Council on Population Development, I know in Kenya, are trying to use to also get national commitments on that, or rather reinforcing the importance of other commitments such as FP 2020. But yeah, I think sometimes advocates are losing out of sight, also the beauty of regional bodies such as the African Union and the beauty contest one could do between some of the member states. Would have some other thoughts also on Germany and EU, but I'll leave it for now here. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Andres, for that deep understanding.
Leah has had.
I think yeah, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to note that on coming from a civil society organization, and sometimes it can be very difficult to hold governments to account because there isn't a level of transparency that allows for interpretation of funding and kind of program delivery on the ground. So that can be very difficult, and I think COVID as well has kind of thrown that into disarray too, because we're seeing obviously funding go towards the larger basket of health, but whether or not that actually is filtered down and is reaching into family planning programs on the ground, we can't hold them to account in the here and now, and you always have to look retrospectively on funding and on commitments to see if they have actually been followed through on, which I think is something that's quite difficult. And I think that looking back on 2020 and 2021, we're going to have to be quite critical, I think, of where funding has ended up to ensure that we can hold governments to account for commitments that they would have made, even on ICPD 25. So I think that's really important moving forward.
Well, thank you, Leah. I think the issue of holding governments accountable is something that we need to deeply discuss in this meeting because of the concept of mutual accountability. Where do you get the balancing act? And I think we have one of the questions that we are going to address later on. So, but thank you.
I just wanted to respond also to the first comment about subnational. I think that is definitely in the category of what we call unfinished agenda. I don't think as a partnership, we've done so well in accountability in general in many of the countries, but I think the subnational level piece is probably an area that we really need to increase our efforts in. And I totally agree with you, even in countries where they maybe implement scorecards or other accountability approaches at the subnational level, how does that align with the national commitments and even the national approaches that countries are using? So I think there's a need for us to align the processes from subnational to national, but even at the national level, like you said, also align with what's happening at the regional level. There are already other everyone, every child commitments, ICPD 25 commitments, FP 2020 commitments. So if you're a civil society partner working in country X, then how do we align all these accountability processes that may be going on because the government has not just made commitments to the FP 2020 partnership, but rather to all these other processes as well. So back to you, Moses.
Yeah, so thank you, Mandy. But also I want to just add, as much as I'm a facilitator, that you account for something that you've committed to. And when it comes to the most limiting factor is how the commitments are made. If you don't involve the subnationals in making commitments, then how do you hold them accountable for what the national level has decided on their behalf? The same thing comes to the national level. We've been seeing most countries, commitments come out of nowhere from the president's office without them being discussed, without seeing how realistic they are, without seeing how achievable they are. And then finally they are, you know, pushed down to the rest of the system in the government. And it becomes very, very difficult for accountability to be achieved. So I think even as you look at the African Union, countries go to the African Union and contribute and discuss commitments. The issue is, how do you make sure that these commitments are from the grassroots, subnational to national to regional, African Union, then global? But what has been happening is the reverse. It starts from top down. People sit in African Union.
Is it just me or
and make decisions, and then things have to talk to this roots upwards. And I think maybe that could help address some of the challenges. But I think the whole concept is, how do we move from holding government accountable to working with government as a partner? So the mutuality which comes in, how do we do that? Because honestly, we've failed on the front of forcing government or holding government accountable. And now the idea now is, how do we work together with government to support where we can so that they can achieve the commitments they've made. So it's a mutuality that now we are moving into.
So I was thinking, so Moses, I know you have been very involved in one approach, the motion tracker, which really implements that mutuality in the process, as you just mentioned. I'm wondering if others have examples of where it has worked. I think as advocates, we came to accountability with, let's hold governments to account. They made the commitment, they need to deliver on the commitments, and our role as watchdogs is to watch the governments. But I think as we move towards more of like a partnership with governments and other key stakeholders to deliver on these commitments, we'll be interested to hear if people have, you know, examples of where that has worked and what did you learn, or what were the challenges?
Well, I think Andreas and Leah have hinted to it, because I think when you look at budget tracking based on what government has put in its own budget papers, and holding government accountable to the commitments that they've made to FP 2020, which would include financial commitments. So excuse me, I think the approaches are a bit different. And because on one side, you are going in, so okay, the government has allocated this money in the budget framework papers to family planning. Let us track this money. On the other hand, you are looking at government going to London and making commitments to contribute certain amount of money to the FP 2020 initiative at country level. And FP 2020 is a partnership. So we come here and say, okay, since it is a partnership, then how can we have that mutual accountability where civil society works with government to ensure that those commitments are met? So I think it's something that is out there for debate and for sharing experiences.
So
yeah, I think that is quite difficult because, like, as you said, it is a partnership. So there's almost a mutual trust that needs to be in place there for that partnership to operate. But at the same time, how do you ensure accountability whilst also maintaining that level of trust, and by not kind of isolating individual members, or, you know, maybe disrupting the fine balance that is there within that. And I think communication is really key, you know, that the partnership is communicating effectively, you know, bilaterally and multilaterally, that individual states within different regions are communicating at a regional level on different policies, and then more broadly then at an international level, so that challenges can be overcome in a timely manner, and that we're not kind of putting things to a side, you know, when they do affect one particular region or one particular state, that everyone is working together towards one common goal. And I think that's really important. I think the communication, like as we've seen with the pandemic, a lot of communication has moved online, and sometimes what we see is that people aren't included anymore in the conversation because of accessibility issues. And I think that, you know, that's something that needs to be addressed, that everyone is available to actually pitch in on the conversations that are happening and be available to have important discussions. And I think, you know, that's very important if you're looking at issues around the partnership and mutual accountability, that again, civil society isn't isolated and civil society is also engaged, and that everything's very transparent.
Thank you, Leah. That's insightful.
So just a quick few, you know, quick thoughts as, you know, I'm thinking about accountability, mutual accountability, partnership. I think that, you know, these are all good, good initiatives and good mechanisms to happen. But in practicality, I think that, you know, the accountability and partnership, I think when we talk about the government is very good at holding the civil society accountable at what is the civil society doing. But when it comes to civil society holding the government accountable, or even when it is a partnership, you know, I think that that's where it gets a little tricky and murkier. And I think we all know this. And how do we get past that is a dilemma that, you know, I haven't quite, you know, in all these years been able to figure out, because there's plenty of things that the government wants to share, where the government in power wants to showcase what they have achieved. But there are so many other things that they don't want to share. And those are the things that they don't want to share are the things that are very critical to hold the government accountable to the commitments that it has made. And I think that's where civil society kind of, you know, falls a little bit on the back burner on getting that information, on holding the government accountable on those pieces which are critical for the progress that are actually to be made. And I'm not sure if there is a silver bullet, or I'm not sure if there is anything that has worked to get that. And I know Moses, the motion tracker work, being with the same partner in Indonesia, yes, and Chipta, I know that there's a lot of information there. But then, you know, also governments from country to country, the government that is one, you know, is willing to share certain information, then we are talking about other governments that are not willing to share any information. So we're kind of, you know, looking at from different country context to when we go to each country, to what level of tiers of, you know, information that they want to share, not share. And I think that tricky part, I'm not sure how far we'll be able to make a dent into it. Even when the civil society is a partner, a strong partner. And I know in countries like India and Bangladesh, the civil society is very strong. I know, you know, in many countries in Africa, the civil society is very strong, but it still falls short at some point. So I want to kind of, you know, hear more from all our panelists and, you know, all our members over here. How do we get past that? Because, you know, we have had some good road blocks removed in, you know, in the countries that, you know, I support and work in India, Bangladesh, Indonesia, to kind of, you know, get to that information, to get the civil society a table at the review committees. But then there's still a blockade to get all of that information. So
thank you so much. Thank you. Andrea's hand is up.
Yeah, thanks. Since the motion tracker was mentioned a couple of times, and I'm totally ignorant of what this is, I'd love to have a quick description by some of the participants here of what it is, and you know, if it can be replicated. And before that, just reacting to Mervyn. I mean, one thing, and this might be more on the donor accountability of what we did with a report that we launched 2 months ago, and yesterday my colleague from Brussels had a side event to present it. It's called, the report is called the Donors Delivering, and DSW together with the European Parliamentary Forum is measuring what percentage of ODA each of the 28, I think UK is still in, each of the 28 member states give to both RMNCNH as well as family planning in particular. And I mean, there's a huge, and this builds on, by the way, on the G7 Muskoka commitments from long ago, but the methodology was renewed. And there were tons of methodological questions where there is no clarity, and even among G7 countries, no unanimity on what the pledge actually means. And what we did is, after a while of checking in with them and trying to get explanations of what they mean, which was not fruitful, we just made our own, or together with an expert panel that we convened, we developed our own best estimates of what they possibly would do. And then they can, of course, now come back to us and say, well, no, this is not what they meant. But then we say, okay, yeah, then tell us what you do. I mean, it's your commitment. You give us your baseline, your CRS, your DAC codes that we are supposed to count into it and everything. And then we'll, it's your commitment, so we'll monitor on your definitions. But as long as you remain vague, we will certainly come up with our best interpretation and go ahead. So maybe just as an example of how to drive that accountability from then governments forward also.
Andreas, do you mind pasting the link to that report on the chat box, the report you just referred to?
Oh, happy to. Yeah, we'll just do right now.
I also just wanted to go back.
And then not forgetting on the motion tracker, I'm really interested.
Yeah, I was going to ask Moses that too, but I just wanted to add a few points based on what I'm hearing. I think for me, mutual accountability as a concept, it makes sense to just build that partnership, and it has worked in some countries, but I totally agree with you, Mervyn. It's difficult in a lot of countries. I think one, you cannot have mutual accountability if there is no government buy-in. So I guess the question is, at what point do you start, at what point, how do you create a balance? You want to partner with governments, but at some point you're going to have to wear your civil society hat and really push when there's no that buy-in and when governments are defensive about things. And then the other piece that's important to me is the funding piece, because accountability is an ongoing process. It's not just a one-time, we do this month and that's it. It's annual. It can be very expensive, especially if you want to expand to subnational levels and all that. So maybe Moses, quick background overview for people who are not familiar with Motion Tracker, but if you can just touch on how have you been able to create that balance of partnering with governments, but at the same time pushing when that's needed, and the funding piece for accountability, because I feel like if there's no funding, or if donors are not committing to investing in accountability, we'll continue to talk about it, but it's not going to get implemented.
Yeah, so what do we do with the motion tracker? And I remember Mandy had said there shouldn't be too much talk about motion tracker. But the way the motion track works is that when government makes commitments, we go back to government and they really explain to us what they understand by the commitments that they made, and what are the minimum standards we expect from them, and also what we can contribute. For instance, if a government made a service delivery commitment of increasing MCPR from a certain percentage to another percentage, MCPR, Maristops, wherever they will contribute in that country. So they are contributing that commitment. If it is a capacity building commitment, civil society contributes. That's our contribution to the government's commitment. If it's a procurement commitment, like putting resources for procurement of contraceptives, civil society comes in to help government to do the quantifications, to help government with the procurement planning, and a few things. So we say as much as government has made the commitment, there is one thing that civil society can contribute to help government to achieve its commitment. And that's the principle of the motion tracker. But the foundation of that working together is what we call the construction of the commitments. We all sit with the senior government officials, put the commitments on table, we interpret the commitments, and we understand the expectations. And once you all agree on that, then we start moving forward. And we don't come on table to hold them actually accountable, but we come on table to work together to make sure that those commitments are met. And that's the mutuality we're talking about. You can't keep holding me accountable when actually yourself you're not doing anything. So you need to bring something on the table. I bring something on the table, and then we work together. But I'll share a link I'll share the motion track link for, we have even a website.
I think it has been shared by Manda already. So thanks. I was listening and
I just shared the steps, but we can also share the whole Samasha motion track. Right?
Yeah, but what we realize that governments are getting tired of civil society walking in and pointing fingers. Every time, where is the money, where is this? But if you walk in and say, we are willing to work with you, we know that you've committed $10 million US and you need to raise that money, but we can help you with the, we can help in certain ways. It may be looking at allocative efficiency, maybe looking at something else, and then you help them. So you come as a partner, and they are more receptive. The other option that is there, and I think we have a question here, is okay, most of the countries in the world have entered the Freedom of Information Acts. They have them. So you can go that one and say, we give you 14 days to give us this information. If you can't, you'll be sued as a government worker. But that strains the relationship. That strains the partnership. And so what you've realized now is that there are some NGOs that are there that don't need to be friendly with the government. They don't have to happily smile with the government officials, but they are there to take government to court. And I think they have a different name. They are not the typical civil society organizations that we have. But now that FP 2020 has made the conscious decision to go mutual accountability, how do you operationalize it? How do you operationalize this mutual accountability? What are the lived experiences that we can really learn from the whole group today? To say, okay, this is an experience from organization. We advanced mutual accountability and it has worked, or we have had challenges. And also the other question would be, at what point do we shift away from mutual accountability? At what point do we say, no, enough is enough, we are now moving to the confrontational era? At what point do we make those decisions?
Moses, I'm very interested in your first question about how do we operationalize mutual accountability, because that's critical to move forward. But I'm also kind of wary about your second suggestion about our question, when do we move into that second area of confrontation? And I'm not sure that that is necessarily an option. I mean, of course, if we all turn into activists, then maybe yes, that could become an option. But if we are all advocates, then I think we'll stick to the mutual accountability, or just kind of being a partner with the government, because we don't want that strained relationship. And as we all know, how it makes it difficult to work with the government for anything for that matter. So
totally agree with you, Mervyn. One thing that I don't think it will solve all our problems, but maybe it will help. So for the new FP 2030 commitments, as you all know, the new partnership was launched last week. And was it last week or 2 weeks ago? I can't remember. It feels like a long time ago already. But anyway, so there's going to be a communication that's going to go to all the commitment making countries about the process of making new commitments or improving their existing commitments. And this time around, there's a clear request for governments as they submit their new commitments to also submit their accountability framework for tracking those commitments. So this is going to be something that will be discussed from the get-go with whoever is in the commitment making committee, including governments, including everyone who's all the key stakeholders that are going to be deciding what are the commitments. They will also be deciding what's their framework for jointly tracking those commitments. So hopefully that will help, because governments will be aware or will be part of deciding what that process should be from the get-go, and therefore hopefully there'll be government buy-in that way. But I don't think that will solve the problem of where governments just doesn't want to share information. But at least hopefully that will be a step towards this mutual accountability framework that we're talking about. Just wanted to share that.
Yeah, thank you, Monday. And yeah, I think the other area that will help improve mutual accountability is for civil society to be involved in the development of these commitments. Previously, it was high level, state house, president, UNFPA goes to state house and they make comment. But I think now, if it's mutual, because if you start together, you end together. But if you start alone and along the way you want me to join you, it becomes a bit difficult. So I think that approach of let government sit with civil society and they agree on measurable commitments, very important. Previously, governments would make vague commitments that you can't measure, you can't track, and they go and have a cocktail and go home and sleep. They're saying no, they should be measurable. But also, the other issue that is really of interest to us is how do we now sustain that partnership at country level? How do you fund that accountability mechanism? If you look at most countries and even at global level, even FP 2020, they had a very beautiful accountability mechanism. Every woman, every child, but you'll never see it funded. You'll never see it funded. How can we ensure that now we can fund accountability mechanisms at country level? We struggle to have advocacy funded, and I think advocacy has taken root. Advocacy now is accepted, it's funded. But when you talk of accountability, we don't expect results, we don't expect this. But if you don't fund, if you don't support an initiative, how do you expect results? So I think as we move forward, I think it's something that we need to discuss, and I would like your ideas. How do we sustain and how do we ensure that accountability at country level, subnational level is funded? Or is it worth funding? That's another question.
And I guess the other question is, I think yes, it's worth funding, but by whom? Because I don't think government will ever fund accountability. So this leaves us with like this over-reliance, like we just rely on donors. But at the same time, donors are really pushing for, at least our donors for FP 2030 partnership are really pushing for this accountability agenda, which we think is great. But the question remains: how do we leverage funding, long-term funding, for accountability? If everyone agrees that it's a critical component to for delivering commitments and just for the partnership success in general, I think that's a question that has not really been answered. I didn't answer your question, Moses. I just amplified your question about funding.
But it's so important. So important. I think, I agree with Moses, Monday, both of you. I mean, these questions remain, and, the funding is such a need of the hour. And I think my personal, just thinking about this is that we need more advocacy for accountability to be there, and then and for accountability to be integrated into the government mechanisms. They have all this management information systems. I mean, those systems in a way are holding them accountable, right? When they track indicators, when they track their progress. So in a way, there is a mechanism which we need to build off of and have a broader accountability, not just to track indicators of CPR and not just to track indicators of total fertility rate, but more broadly about the overall commitments. So I think we need to build off of, and we need, just as Moses indicated, more funding. And I think advocacy could be one of the ways where accountability could be kind of, the key centerpiece of it. And I think I want to add one more A to that piece is advocacy, accountability, and action. Because we just don't need to hold them accountable. We also need to chart the next course of action when something does not happen.
Thank you so much, Marvin. It's 6:55. So we're about to wind out, but I would like to listen to some voices. Lorelei, I don't know if I've pronounced your name properly.
Lorelei.
Yes, Lorelei, please, we want to hear your voice.
Well, thank you so much. I've enjoyed listening in on this session. The commitments process is new to me, so I was very much interested in hearing about some of the things that you've found to work and to be challenging about moving, encouraging commitments, but also holding countries accountable, and wanting to celebrate the advances made, but also needing to recognize when things have fallen short. And I can see how it's civil society is there watching what's really transpiring in country settings and plays a very important role. But in some settings, it may be hard for them to be able to express what they're seeing if they feel like the government will then put pressure on them to suppress their points of view. So I do think that independent measurement is important. It also allows for sort of objectivity. If it's an independent accountability mechanism. But I think that wanting to uphold what works well and to highlight that as an incentive for governments to be taking action is great, but it's really not clear to me who's in a position to say that's not enough and to hold them to that. So I thank you very much for letting me sit in on your session. It's a new area for me to be learning about, and I appreciate the discussion.
Thank you so much, Lorelei. Yeah, it's an area that we need, because actually for me, I believe if we took seriously the commitments that organizations make, countries make, would make a big leap in pushing forward the family planning agenda.
Yeah. Also, sorry, Moses, before we move on, just wanted to plug two things. One is we do have what we call an external accountability advisory group with a lot of key partners that are working in this area with donors and government partners. So definitely these conversations are ongoing. But in March, we are planning a partners-donor conversation specifically around funding for accountability. So we'll let you all know about when that conversation is going to happen. And I really think in that conversation, some of us will have to wear our advocates hats and really be advocates and advocate for donors to fund accountability. So more information about that will be shared. Sorry, Moses, go ahead.
I think, are we going to be cut off exactly at 7, or I can allow people to give their parting shots?
I am not sure. We may be cut off, but I'm not sure.
Okay, let's take a risk.
Yeah,
or should we do an evaluation?
I believe we'll cut off at the hour.
In like 1 minute?
Yes.
Can we do a quick evaluation?
Yes, I'll post the Menti in the chat. And if you all would not mind just filling out what you all thought of this conversation, that would be very helpful.
Thanks, Sophie.
So yeah, technology can be hard on us all, cutting off us off wherever the discussion is. But thanks for moderating, Moses, and thanks for convening the meeting. I learned a lot, so thanks.
Yes,
Thank
thank you, Moses, Made. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks, Moses. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Everyone, thank you.
I feel like the time was so little.
Yeah. I mean, we have more opportunities.
Yeah. Can you, how are you going to do the evaluation?
I posted the link in the chat.
Okay. Thank you so much. You guys have been wonderful. Thanks for the materials that are online. But I think as we move forward with the agenda of FP 2030 agenda, let us not end the FP 2030 with an unfinished agenda on accountability. Let us find out how we can operationalize the mutual accountability. Let us see how we can make accountability sexy and fundable. We have failures within accountability, but every time you face government officials to ask for accountability, you conscientize them. Is that how you say it? I've realized every time you keep asking them for accountability, they keep being more careful. They keep being more proactive. Every time you forget to hold them accountable or to talk to them about accountability, then they relax and they don't do anything. So accountability keeps people on their foot, keeps people thinking about the agenda. Let us keep the commitments visible when they are made, and for us to keep them visible, we must have that mutual accountability and partnership. So thank you so much, and I wish you the best. Keep safe. COVID is still here. We need to make sure by FP 2030 we are all alive and celebrating. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
So that at the